What's up, guys? We're here at Arlington. Watch this. I'm about to expose how fake all this military theater really is. This is my brother, Miguel, 19. No body to send home. I promise to guard their memory.
Today you're going to learn about the incredible story of Marcus Thompson, a disrespectful tourist whose encounter with an Arlington Cemetery tomb guard led to a moment that would change his perspective on honor and sacrifice forever. Get ready for a narrative full of unexpected twists and a powerful lesson about respect. Before we begin this amazing story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Arlington National Cemetery as thousands of visitors made their pilgrimage to honor America's fallen heroes. Among them walked Marcus Thompson, a 28-year-old social media influencer from Los Angeles, his phone constantly in hand, documenting every moment for his followers. Marcus had built his online presence on controversial content, pushing boundaries and challenging authority wherever he went. "What's up, guys?" Marcus whispered loudly into his phone camera as he approached the tomb of the unknown soldier. "We're here at Arlington Cemetery, and I'm about to show you something that's going to blow your minds. These guards here think they're so tough, but let's see what happens when someone actually challenges them." The tomb of the unknown soldier stood majestically before him, a white marble monument that had served as the final resting place for unidentified American service members since 1921. The inscription, "Here rests in honored glory, an American soldier known but to God," seemed to mock Marcus's irreverent attitude as he continued filming. Staff Sergeant David Rodriguez had been serving as a tomb guard for 3 years. At 32 years old, the former Marine had earned his position through rigorous training and unwavering dedication. His uniform was immaculate, every crease perfect, every button polished to a mirror shine. He moved with the precision of a metronome, 21 steps south, 21 steps north, a pause of exactly 21 seconds at each end of his route. The ceremony of the changing of the guard was about to begin, and hundreds of visitors had gathered in respectful silence. Children held their parents' hands. Veterans stood at attention, and elderly couples wiped away tears as they remembered loved ones lost in service to their country. Marcus, however, had different plans. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the dirty looks and whispered protests from other visitors. His phone was still recording as he ducked under the chain barrier that separated the public from the sacred ground surrounding the tomb. "Security here is a joke," he muttered into his camera, his voice carrying further than he intended. "Watch this, guys. I'm about to expose how fake all this military theater really is." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez noticed the disturbance immediately. His trained eyes caught the movement in his peripheral vision, but his discipline kept him focused on his sacred duty. The changing of the guard ceremony was a solemn ritual that honored not just the unknown soldiers buried beneath the marble, but every American who had made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. Marcus stepped closer to the tomb, his sneakers squeaking against the polished marble. The crowd behind him began to murmur with disapproval, but he thrived on the attention. His follower count had been stagnating lately, and he needed something viral to boost his engagement. "Look at this guy," Marcus said, pointing his camera at Sergeant Rodriguez. "He's just walking back and forth like a robot. What's he gonna do if I just—" Marcus reached out toward the guard's ceremonial rifle, a modified M14 that had been meticulously maintained and was an integral part of the honor guard tradition. The moment Marcus's fingers made contact with the weapon, everything changed. Sergeant Rodriguez moved with lightning speed, his training taking over. In one fluid motion, he secured his rifle and positioned himself between Marcus and the tomb. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of every soldier who had ever stood guard over America's sacred ground. "Sir, I am asking you to step back immediately and show proper respect for this hallowed ground," Rodriguez said, his voice steady but firm. "You are standing on soil that has been consecrated by the sacrifice of American heroes." Marcus laughed, still filming. "Oh, what are you gonna do, arrest me? This is public property, dude. I have rights." His voice echoed across the cemetery, causing nearby visitors to turn and stare in shock and disgust. What happened next would be captured not just on Marcus's phone, but on the security cameras positioned throughout the cemetery, and in the hearts and minds of everyone present that day. Sergeant Rodriguez didn't raise his voice, he didn't use force. Instead, he did something that no one, least of all Marcus, expected. The guard slowly and deliberately removed his white gloves, folding them with the same precision he applied to every aspect of his duty. He then reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph. His hands, Marcus noticed for the first time, bore the scars of combat, thin white lines across his knuckles and a deeper mark along his left wrist. "Sir," Rodriguez began, his voice now carrying a weight that seemed to press down on everyone within earshot, "before you continue with whatever it is you think you're doing here, I want you to see something." Sergeant Rodriguez held up the photograph, and even through Marcus's phone camera, the image was clear enough for viewers to see. It showed a young Marine in dress blues, barely 18 years old, with bright eyes and a confident smile. Standing next to him was an older version of the same face, Rodriguez himself, also in uniform, his arm proudly draped around the younger man's shoulders. "This is my little brother, Private First Class Miguel Rodriguez," the sergeant said, his voice never wavering despite the emotion clearly visible in his eyes. He was 19 when he stepped on an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan. There wasn't enough left of him to send home for burial. The crowd had grown completely silent. Even Marcus had stopped his commentary, though his phone continued recording. The weight of the sergeant's words seemed to settle over the entire area like a heavy blanket. "Miguel always talked about serving his country with honor," Rodriguez continued. "He used to say that every American soldier, living or dead, known or unknown, deserved to be remembered with dignity. When he died, I made a promise to him and to every service member who never made it home. I would stand guard over their memory." Rodriguez carefully returned the photograph to his pocket, then looked directly at Marcus. "Sir, you're not just disrespecting me or this ceremony. You're disrespecting my brother and the thousands of men and women who gave everything so that you could have the freedom to stand here today and express yourself, even in the way you're choosing to do it." Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine shame. The camera in his hand suddenly felt incredibly heavy. Around him he could see the faces of the other visitors. Some were crying. Others looked at him with a mixture of anger and disappointment that cut deeper than any harsh words could have. An elderly man in a wheelchair, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap, slowly wheeled himself forward. His weathered hands gripped the armrests of his chair as he looked up at Marcus with eyes that had seen too much war and too much loss. "Son," the veteran said, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow audible to everyone present, "I lost half my platoon in the jungles of Vietnam. Good boys, most of them younger than you are now. They died believing they were protecting something sacred, the idea that America stands for something bigger than any one person's desire for attention." Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him. He saw a young mother holding her toddler, pointing toward the tomb and whispering about Daddy who was sleeping with the angels. He saw a group of active duty soldiers, their faces stone cold with disapproval. He saw teenagers who had been laughing and taking selfies just moments before, now standing in respectful silence. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Thompson understood that he was not the center of the universe. Sergeant Rodriguez stepped closer to Marcus, but not in a threatening way. His movement was deliberate, almost gentle, like a teacher approaching a student who had just realized they'd made a terrible mistake. "Sir, I want you to understand something," Rodriguez said, his voice now softer but no less powerful. "This rifle you tried to grab, it's not just a weapon. It's a symbol of the trust that the American people have placed in me to guard their most sacred space. Every morning when I put on this uniform, I'm not just representing myself or even the army. I'm representing every Gold Star mother who will never see her son come home, every widow who still sets two places at the dinner table out of habit, every child who only knows their father through photographs and stories." Marcus's phone was still recording, but he had lowered it to his side. His followers watching the live stream were flooding the comments with messages he couldn't see, some supporting him, but many more expressing their disgust at his behavior and their admiration for the guard's response. "I've been standing guard here for 3 years," Rodriguez continued. "In that time, I've seen thousands of people come to pay their respects. I've seen grown men break down in tears at this tomb. I've seen children place flowers and drawings. I've seen foreign dignitaries bow their heads in respect for American sacrifice. But I've never seen someone try to turn this sacred place into content for social media entertainment." The sergeant paused, allowing his words to sink in. Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him, but more than that, He felt the weight of his own conscience, something he had successfully ignored for years. "You want to know what I'm going to do?" Rodriguez asked, echoing Marcus's earlier taunt. "I'm going to give you a choice. You can continue with whatever stunt you had planned, and I'll have the cemetery police escort you out and ban you from ever returning. Or you can put that phone away, step back behind the barrier, and learn something about the men and women who died, so you could have the freedom to make that choice." Marcus looked down at his phone. The red recording light seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. His entire career, his income, his identity, everything was built on moments like this, on pushing boundaries and creating controversy. But standing there, surrounded by the weight of American history and sacrifice, none of that seemed to matter anymore. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus Thompson did something he had never done before in his career as an influencer. He stopped recording. The click of the phone's camera app closing seemed to echo across the silent cemetery. Marcus looked up at Sergeant Rodriguez, then at the crowd of people watching him. For the first time, he really saw them, not as an audience for his content, but as human beings with their own stories, their own losses, their own reasons for being there. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and the words came out as barely a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again, louder this time. "I'm sorry. I didn't think about what this place really means." Sergeant Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Apology accepted, sir. But the people you really owe an apology to aren't here to receive it. They're resting beneath this marble, and in cemeteries across the world, and in the hearts of the families they left behind." Marcus stepped back behind the barrier, his movements uncertain, like someone learning to walk again. The crowd began to disperse slightly, but many remained, sensing that something important was still unfolding. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present, creating a silence so profound that even the distant sounds of Washington, D.C. traffic seemed muted and respectful. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said to the sergeant, his voice trembling slightly. "How do you do this every day? How do you carry the weight of all these stories, all this loss?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the tomb. When he spoke, his words carried the wisdom of someone who had stared death in the face and chosen to dedicate his life to honoring it. "Because someone has to," he finally said. "Because these soldiers, the ones we know and the ones we don't, they carried the weight of protecting our freedom. The least I can do is carry the weight of remembering them." The elderly Vietnam veteran wheeled his chair closer to Marcus, his weathered hands gripping the armrests with determination. The medals on his chest caught the morning sunlight, each one representing a story of courage and sacrifice that Marcus was only beginning to understand. "Son, you asked how he does it every day. Let me tell you something. We all carry that weight. Every American who understands what freedom really costs carries it. The question is, what you're going to do with it, now that you feel it too." Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him, the sergeant, the veteran, the families, the children who had been watching the entire exchange with wide, curious eyes. He thought about his followers, his content, his entire life built on controversy and disrespect. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely ashamed of who he had become, but more importantly, he felt the possibility of becoming someone better. A young woman approached the group, her military uniform indicating she was an active duty soldier. In her hands, she carried a small American flag and a single white rose. "Excuse me," she said softly, addressing Marcus directly. "I couldn't help but overhear what happened here. My name is Lieutenant Sarah Chen, and I wanted to share something with you." She held up the flag and the rose. "These are for my grandfather, Staff Sergeant James Chen, who died in Korea. His body was never recovered. For 70 years, my family has wondered if he might be one of the unknowns resting here. Every year on his birthday, I come here to leave these, just in case." Marcus felt his throat tighten as Lieutenant Chen continued. "What you did today, trying to grab that rifle, treating this place like it was just another backdrop for your video, it felt like you were disrespecting not just the guards or the ceremony, but my grandfather's memory. The memory of every soldier whose family still wonders, still hopes, still grieves." The lieutenant's words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had never considered the ripple effects of his actions, the way his disrespect could wound people he had never met, families he would never know. The realization was overwhelming. "What can I do?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "How can I make this right? How can I honor your grandfather and Sergeant Rodriguez's brother and all the others?" Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, placing a gentle but firm hand on Marcus's shoulder. You can start by understanding that respect isn't something you perform for a camera. It's something you carry in your heart. You can learn about the people who are buried here, the sacrifices they made. You can use that platform you have to educate instead of entertain, to honor instead of mock. Lieutenant Chen nodded in agreement. You have something that most of us don't, a voice that reaches thousands of people. You could use that voice to tell their stories, to make sure they're not forgotten. Marcus looked down at his phone, still clutched in his hand. The device that had been his tool for creating controversy and seeking attention suddenly seemed like it could be something more, a way to give voice to the voiceless, to honor the forgotten, to educate the ignorant. "Will you help me?" Marcus asked, looking between Rodriguez and Chen. "Will you teach me about your brother, about your grandfather, about this place? Will you help me understand what I should have known all along?" "It would be my honor," Rodriguez replied, and Chen nodded her agreement. The transformation didn't happen overnight. 3 months later, Marcus Thompson returned to Arlington National Cemetery, but this time he came not as a provocateur, seeking viral content, but as a volunteer guide, helping visitors understand the significance of the sacred ground they walked on. He had spent weeks studying military history, interviewing veterans, and learning about the men and women whose sacrifices had made his freedom possible. His social media presence had transformed completely. Instead of controversy and disrespect, he now shared stories of American heroes, educated his followers about military history, and raised funds for Gold Star families. His follower count had initially dropped when he stopped posting controversial content, but it had slowly grown again as people discovered his new mission. The video he had been recording that day was never posted to his original account. Instead, he used it as the foundation for a documentary about the tomb guards and the unknown soldiers they protect. The documentary, titled The Weight of Honor, won several awards and helped raise over $2 million for veteran support organizations. Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, placing a gentle but firm hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You can start by understanding that respect isn't something you perform for a camera. It's something you carry in your heart. You can learn about the people who are buried here, the sacrifices they made. You can use that platform you have to educate instead of entertain, to honor instead of mock." Lieutenant Chen nodded in agreement. "You have something that most of us don't, a voice that reaches thousands of people. You could use that voice to tell their stories, to make sure they're not forgotten." Marcus looked down at his phone, still clutched in his hand. The device that had been his tool for creating controversy and seeking attention suddenly seemed like it could be something more, a way to give voice to the voiceless, to honor the forgotten, to educate the ignorant. "Will you help me?" Marcus asked, looking between Rodriguez and Chen. "Will you teach me about your brother, about your grandfather, about this place? Will you help me understand what I should have known all along?" "It would be my honor," Rodriguez replied, and Chen nodded her agreement. An older woman who had been standing quietly in the crowd stepped forward. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a small gold star pin on her black coat, the symbol of a mother who had lost a child in military service. "Young man," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes, "my son Tommy was 22 when his helicopter went down in Iraq. They found some remains, enough for a funeral, but—" She paused, collecting herself. "But I come here sometimes because I know there are mothers like me whose sons never came home at all. This place represents every mother's worst nightmare and every mother's greatest pride." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn prayer card. "This was from Tommy's funeral. I want you to have it, not because I forgive what you did today, but because I believe people can change. I believe you can become someone who honors our children instead of mocking them." Marcus accepted the card with trembling hands. The photograph showed a young soldier with kind eyes and a gentle smile, someone who looked like he could have been Marcus's own brother. The weight of the card seemed disproportionate to its size, as if it contained all the love and loss of a grieving mother. "Thank you," Marcus whispered. "I promise I'll do better. I'll be better." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was profound and lasting. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson had become one of the most respected voices in military education and veteran advocacy. His social media platforms, once filled with pranks and controversy, now featured carefully researched stories about American heroes, interviews with veterans, and fundraising campaigns for military families. He had spent countless hours at Arlington, learning from the guards, the historians, and the families who visited. He could now recite the names and stories of dozens of soldiers buried there, and he made sure his followers knew them too. His documentary series, Faces Behind the Flags, had garnered millions of views and raised substantial funds for veteran support organizations. Sergeant Rodriguez had become not just a friend but a mentor, teaching Marcus about military history, protocol, and the deep traditions that gave meaning to ceremonies like the changing of the guard. Lieutenant Chen had introduced him to other military families, each with their own stories of loss and resilience. On the anniversary of that fateful day, Marcus returned to the tomb of the unknown soldier. This time he came not as a disruptive influencer, but as a changed man carrying flowers and a handwritten letter. The letter was addressed to all the unknown soldiers, an apology for his past behavior, and a promise to continue honoring their sacrifice. As he placed the flowers at the base of the tomb, Sergeant Rodriguez approached, now off duty but still carrying himself with military bearing. "You've come a long way," Rodriguez said, standing beside Marcus as they both faced the marble monument. "I had good teachers," Marcus replied. "Your brother, Lieutenant Chen's grandfather, Mrs. Patterson's son, Tommy. They all taught me something important about what it means to serve something bigger than yourself." The two men stood in comfortable silence, watching as other visitors paid their respects. Marcus noticed a young teenager with a phone taking selfies near the tomb. For a moment, he saw himself from a year ago, and he felt compelled to act. Walking over to the teenager, Marcus spoke quietly. "Hey, I'm Marcus Thompson. I make videos about military history. Would you like to know the story behind this place? It's pretty incredible." The teenager looked up, recognizing Marcus from his social media presence. "Oh wow, yeah, I love your videos about World War II heroes." As Marcus began to share the story of the unknown soldier, explaining the significance of the tomb and the dedication of the guards who protected it, he realized that this was his true calling, not to tear down or mock, but to build up and educate, not to seek attention for himself, but to ensure that the stories of America's heroes would never be forgotten. The lesson Marcus learned that day at Arlington had become the foundation of his new life. True influence comes not from controversy or disrespect, but from understanding the weight of sacrifice and choosing to honor it with every word, every action, and every breath.